My name is Richard. I'm 72 years old, and 3 years ago, I did what thousands of retirement videos told me was the smartest financial decision of my life. I sold my little beach house in Southern California for just over $1 million, packed 2 suitcases, and moved to the Philippines convinced I'd never have to worry about money again. For the first year, I honestly believed I'd beaten the system. My monthly expenses dropped by nearly 70%. I had warm weather every day, fresh seafood that cost less than a fast food meal back home, and enough money in the bank to sleep peacefully every night. Then one phone call from my daughter changed everything. 6 months later, I found myself standing in front of the same house I'd sold, staring through a locked gate, while the real estate agent quietly explained that buying it back would now cost almost twice what I'd sold it for. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just sold a house. I'd sold my way home. This is the story of why I left California, why I desperately wanted to come back, and the mistake that cost me far more than money. I bought that house in Huntington Beach back in 1991, long before anyone started calling California real estate an investment strategy. Back then, it was simply where my wife Susan and I wanted to grow old together. It wasn't glamorous. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, a small backyard that could barely fit a barbecue and 2 lounge chairs. But if you stood on the upstairs balcony and leaned just a little over the railing, you could see a thin strip of the Pacific Ocean sparkling between 2 rows of palm trees. For us, that view was priceless. Susan loved watching the sunset every evening with a cup of tea. I'd usually join her after finishing work at the marina, where I'd spent almost 35 years repairing boat engines. We'd sit there quietly, talking about our grandchildren, arguing over baseball scores, or saying nothing at all. Those ordinary evenings became the best memories of my life. When Susan passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2021, the house became painfully quiet. Every room reminded me of her. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the cinnamon candles she burned every Christmas. Her gardening gloves still hung in the garage. Sometimes I'd walk into the bedroom expecting to hear her ask if I'd remembered to lock the back door before realizing, once again, that she was gone. Living there alone became harder every month. My pension from the marina brought in about $2,400 a month. Social Security added another $2,100. Financially, I wasn't struggling. Emotionally, I was. Then YouTube started recommending videos about retiring overseas. At first, I watched out of curiosity. One video became 10. 10 became 50. Before long, my evenings weren't spent watching baseball anymore. They were spent watching smiling retirees sitting beside infinity pools in Southeast Asia, explaining how they lived comfortably on less than $2,000 a month. Every thumbnail promised the same thing: retire like a king, escape America's high costs, paradise for half the price. The Philippines appeared over and over again. Everyone spoke English. People seemed friendly. Healthcare looked affordable. The weather was warm. And every creator insisted the same thing: if you're retiring on American income, you'll live better here than almost anywhere else. I started making spreadsheets. Property taxes in California? Gone. Ridiculous utility bills? Gone. State income taxes? Gone. Even groceries looked dramatically cheaper. One evening I calculated that my retirement income would cover nearly double my monthly expenses if I lived in the Philippines. That number changed everything. Suddenly the beach house stopped feeling like home. It started looking like trapped money. The house had appreciated far beyond anything Susan and I ever imagined. Real estate websites estimated it was worth just over $1 million. $1 million sitting inside walls I no longer needed. Or at least, that's what I believed. My daughter Emily tried to slow me down. "Dad," she said, "why don't you rent it out for a year instead?" I laughed. Renting felt complicated. Selling felt simple. Besides, every financial video I watched made it sound obvious. Why leave $1 million locked inside a house when that money could fund decades of adventure? Looking back, I realize I wasn't really chasing a cheaper life. I was running away from loneliness. Those are two very different decisions. I just couldn't tell the difference back then. The house sold faster than I expected. 9 days on the market. 3 offers. 1 bidding war. Final sale price. $1,083,000. After commissions, taxes, and paying off the tiny remaining mortgage balance, I walked away with just under $940,000. I'd never seen that much money in my life. Seeing those numbers in my investment account felt surreal. For weeks I walked around believing every financial worry I'd ever had simply disappeared. Friends congratulated me. Neighbors said I was brave. Even the buyers seemed excited. They were a young couple expecting their first child. I remember handing them the keys. The husband smiled and said, "We're going to make so many memories here." I smiled back. But something in my stomach tightened. That should have been my first warning. Instead, I ignored it. 3 months later, I boarded a one-way flight to Manila with 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on backpack, and a head full of dreams. As the plane lifted off from Los Angeles, I looked out the window until the California coastline disappeared beneath the clouds. I honestly believed I would never live there again. At the time, that thought made me feel free. I had no idea that one day it would break my heart. If you'd asked me 6 months after arriving whether I'd made the right decision, I wouldn't have hesitated. Absolutely. I rented a modern 2-bedroom condominium overlooking the water in Dumaguete for the equivalent of about $600 a month. The building had security 24 hours a day, a swimming pool I rarely used, and neighbors from Canada, Australia, Germany, and the United States, who all seemed to have stories remarkably similar to mine. Every Wednesday morning, a group of us met at the same little cafe near the boulevard. We'd drink coffee, complain about politics back home, compare exchange rates, and laugh about how little we were spending. One retired engineer from Oregon kept a notebook of everything he bought. He'd grin every week and announce things like, "Lunch for 2 yesterday, $7. Another fellow from Texas loved telling anyone who would listen that his monthly electric bill was less than what he'd paid for cable television back in Dallas. Those conversations reinforced something I desperately wanted to believe. That we'd figured out retirement while everyone else back home was still struggling. My own numbers certainly looked impressive. Between my pension, Social Security, and investment income from selling the house, I brought in a little over $5,300 each month. Even after rent, groceries, utilities, health insurance, transportation, and dinners out, I was spending less than $2,000. Every month, my investment account seemed untouched. Sometimes it even grew. I started traveling around the country. Cebu, Bohol, Palawan, Siargao, places I'd only seen in travel magazines. For the first time since Susan died, I caught myself laughing without forcing it. The sadness hadn't disappeared, but it had become quieter. I'd convinced myself I'd found exactly what I'd been missing. What I didn't realize was that happiness built entirely around novelty has an expiration date. Eventually, paradise becomes normal. And once it becomes normal, everything you left behind starts becoming visible again. The first Christmas didn't bother me much. Emily and the grandkids called over video chat. We laughed, opened presents together through computer screens, promised we'd see each other soon. It felt modern, different, manageable. The second Christmas was harder. My youngest grandson had grown nearly 6 inches since I'd last hugged him. My granddaughter had started driving. Birthdays became FaceTime calls. Thanksgiving became photographs. Baseball games became text messages. Life back home kept moving. Without me. Time zones turned ordinary conversations into scheduling exercises. When Emily was making breakfast, I was getting ready for bed. When I wanted to call, she was working. When she was free, I was asleep. Little by little, we spoke less. Not because anyone stopped caring, because life has momentum, and I was no longer living inside theirs. Then my oldest friend, Mike, passed away unexpectedly. Heart attack. 74 years old. I'd known Mike since high school. We'd fished together, worked on cars together, stood beside each other at our weddings. I watched his funeral through a live stream on my laptop. After the service ended, I sat alone in my condo listening to motorcycles outside and realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. When people you love begin reaching the end of their lives, distance becomes expensive in ways airline tickets can't measure. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Emily called around 9. I could tell immediately something was wrong. She tried smiling. It didn't last long. "Dad?" Her voice cracked. "I don't want you to panic. No sentence has ever successfully prevented panic." She explained that she'd been having severe abdominal pain for several days. Doctors believed it wasn't life-threatening, but surgery was scheduled for later that week. "I'll be okay," she kept saying. "I promise." I booked my flight before we even finished talking. The first available seat cost nearly $2,300. I didn't care. 22 hours later, I was standing beside her hospital bed in Orange County. The surgery went well. She recovered quickly. But during those days at the hospital, something unexpected happened. My grandchildren stopped treating me like the grandfather who lived overseas. They started treating me like grandpa again. The little routines returned naturally. Driving them to school, making pancakes, walking the dog, helping with homework, watching baseball together after dinner. Nothing extraordinary, just ordinary family life. The kind I'd quietly convinced myself I didn't need anymore. On my final evening before flying back to the Philippines, my youngest grandson asked one simple question. "Grandpa, why do you live so far away?" Children have a remarkable ability to ask questions adults spend years avoiding. I gave him every practical answer. "It's cheaper. The weather is nicer. I like it there." He nodded politely. Then he hugged me and whispered, "I wish you lived here." I smiled. But something inside me broke. That 12-second conversation stayed with me for the entire flight back across the Pacific. For the first time since selling the house, I wasn't thinking about how affordable my new life was. I was thinking about everything I'd traded to get it. When I returned to the Philippines after Emily's surgery, everything looked exactly the same. The ocean was still beautiful. The palm trees still swayed outside my balcony. The cafe still served the same coffee every Wednesday morning. Nothing had changed, except me. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about home. I found myself opening California real estate websites almost every evening. At first, it was just curiosity. I'd type in my old address, look at the photographs, shake my head, and close the browser. Then I started checking every day. One afternoon I saw that my old house had sold again. This time, not for $1 million. Not even close. The sale price was listed at $1.78 million. I refreshed the page because I assumed I'd misread it. I hadn't. In less than 3 years, the value had increased by nearly $700,000. I sat there, staring at the screen for almost 10 minutes. It wasn't jealousy. It was disbelief. I remembered every conversation I'd had before selling. Friends had warned me, California prices almost never stayed down for long. Emily had gently suggested renting instead of selling. Even my real estate agent had asked twice whether I was absolutely certain. At the time, I believed everyone was being emotional. I thought I was being practical. Now I wasn't so sure. That night I barely slept. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine something I'd been refusing to consider. What if I wanted to come home? I contacted a realtor in Huntington Beach the following week. She was kind, patient, and probably used to conversations like mine. I explained that I'd lived there for decades before retiring overseas. I'd love to move back, I told her. She asked what my budget was. When I said around $1 million, there was a long pause. Finally, she sighed softly. I'm afraid the market has changed quite a bit. She wasn't exaggerating. The homes I used to consider ordinary starter houses were now selling for prices I would have called impossible just a few years earlier. My old neighborhood had transformed. New cafes, renovated homes, electric vehicles in nearly every driveway. Investors had discovered the area. Remote workers had discovered the area. Everyone seemed to want what I'd willingly given away. The realtor emailed me a list of available homes. I opened every listing. None of them were my house. None of them even resembled it. Most were smaller, farther from the beach, older. Yet every one of them cost dramatically more than I'd expected. I started running numbers. The proceeds from selling my home had funded my retirement. But I'd invested carefully, spent responsibly. But buying another house in Southern California meant withdrawing a massive portion of the investments that now generated my retirement income. Even if I could technically afford it, I'd be destroying the financial security I'd worked so hard to create. The irony was painful. Selling the house had made retirement affordable. Buying another one would make retirement uncertain. I had built a comfortable life in the Philippines, but the price of returning to California had quietly climbed beyond my reach. During another visit to California 6 months later, I drove past my old neighborhood. I told myself it was just curiosity. Deep down, I knew it was something else. The street looked almost identical. The same mature trees. The same sidewalks where Susan and I used to walk after dinner. The same sound of distant waves carried by the evening breeze. But the house, it wasn't mine anymore. The new owners had painted it white instead of pale blue. The old wooden fence I'd built with my brother had been replaced by sleek black metal. Susan's rose garden was gone. In its place stood a modern patio, with outdoor furniture and decorative lighting. Children's bicycles rested near the garage. A golden retriever slept beside the front porch. Life had continued exactly as it should. Just without me. I parked across the street and sat there for almost 20 minutes. Not because I wanted the house back, because I wanted the life attached to it. There's a difference. You can't buy 30 years of memories. You can't purchase Saturday barbecues. You can't buy back sunsets shared with someone who's gone. I finally understood that I'd been chasing the wrong thing. It wasn't California I missed most. It was belonging. The house had simply become the symbol of everything I'd left behind. People often ask whether I regret retiring in the Philippines. The honest answer is no and yes. No, because the Philippines gave me 3 years of peace when I desperately needed a fresh start. It reminded me that life could still surprise me after losing Susan. It introduced me to wonderful people I'll always consider friends. It stretched my retirement savings farther than California ever could. But yes, I regret believing every life decision has to be permanent. If I could do it again, I wouldn't have sold my house immediately. I would have rented it for a year. Maybe two. I would have lived in the Philippines long enough to discover whether I was running toward a new life, or simply running away from grief. There's a difference that's impossible to appreciate until you've lived it. Today, I'm still in the Philippines for most of the year, but I spend several months each year in California, renting a small apartment close to Emily and the grandchildren. It's more expensive than I'd like. Far less comfortable than the home I once owned. But every Saturday morning I make pancakes for my grandkids. Every Wednesday I attend my grandson's baseball games. Every birthday is celebrated in person instead of through a phone screen. Those moments cost money. They're worth every dollar. If you're thinking about selling your home to retire overseas, I'm not here to tell you not to do it. I'm simply asking you to consider one question I never asked myself. Are you selling a house, or are you selling your way back? Because markets can rise, homes can be replaced, money can be earned again. But time with the people you love has a value no spreadsheet will ever calculate. If my story saves even one person from making a decision they'll spend years trying to reverse, then sharing it has been worth it. And next week, I'll show you the actual retirement budget I use today, how I split my time between California and the Philippines, what it really costs, and the financial changes I had to make after realizing home isn't always where you expect it to be.